It is my great pleasure to start with this last panel tonight. The panel with the most catchy title to my assessment, as the organizers were so kind to propose the title Re-enchanting the European Dream. Are we still capable of living together? Which is such a important question, not only for the region here, not only for the V4 countries, but for the European Union, I believe, for Europe in the widest possible sense. And it's a great pleasure for myself to at least to try to swiftly moderate this panel. In my understanding, what we would try to do tonight is to answer a question: what is happening to us? What is happening to us Europeans in a sense of, do we still have that dream that we used to have years ago? The dream that started with the founding fathers of the European communities, and then so widely shared by the other countries, other nations, so eagerly joining the EU, and now at the number of 28 countries, what exactly are we facing? Are we facing the crisis that could be the biggest crisis ever? Or maybe this is just one of the very minor little crises that are happening actually in the history of the EU very often. So is this really the migration crisis that we are facing as the most challenging one at the moment? Some would keep repeating that the EU, that Europe in general, is experiencing this huge crisis, but on the other side, the EU is being driven by crises. So the migration crisis, so-called migration crisis at the moment, may lead it to even to the further integration. But the others would say that this is the beginning of the end. And is it really only about the migration? One of the questions. When has it started? With Brexit, Grexit, financial crisis before? Or maybe the European Constitution that never managed to become a reality for this continent. Is it because of a different approach towards further integration that can be observed in the Euro and non-Eurozone? Is it still the division in between old member states and new member states? Is it still valid?
I always happens to me.
So just to say that I just thought that these questions are very relevant in this region, as this region experienced the largest historical enlargement of the EU 11 years ago. And at that moment, I remember personally that it was such a great enthusiasm in the region and in our countries in 2004 when we were entering. And I believe that we are maybe the group to try this enthusiasm in ourselves also today. So to start with maybe the economic issue. Is it all about money? Is it all about our disappointment in the economic sense? That is it really that the lack of the solidarity in Europe started with financial crisis, with the first debates that leaders had on whether to keep budgetary constraints or more job protective policies to be introduced? Then the danger of Grexit, so serious danger of Grexit appeared, somehow resolved for the moment, but still, is it resolved for forever, or is it still threatening us? can we find a common understanding on how to face the economic turbulence? I'll start with asking this question and hoping for a fair answer. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Tomasz Sedlaczek.
Thank you. There is this myth going on that America is much more pro-business, more economic in its thinking, and we Europeans are cultured and we, have a good work-life balance. In fact, if you look at the history, this really doesn't, hold. The great crisis in the 1930s was deeper, and it also started in America, but it didn't lead to a civil war or no aggression in the United States of America. It came to Europe, and we ferociously attacked each other. In America, they contained the economic problem within the economic implosion chamber, so to speak, while we hysterically overreacted. This crisis that's happening now in 2007, 2008, of course in a smaller case, but it had a similar trajectory, started in America, was a little bit more deeper in America, but it didn't lead to anybody actually coming up with the idea, so let's dismantle the United States of America, or let's get rid of this common currency called dollar, or let's help California to kick her out of the dollar zone so that she can devaluate. This is actually a set of ideas that nobody in his right mind came up with. The crisis touched Europe, and we immediately wanted to destroy something, either Euro or European integration itself. So it is us Europeans who tend to overreact to economic crises much more than our closest ally, which would be United States of America. 10 years ago, it was 2005, and the world looked peaceful and wonderful. Since then, we had 4 crises: the financial crisis, the Greek crisis, the Ukrainian crisis, and now, let's say, the immigrant crisis. First question was, will you help each other among equals? Will, banks and all that? And to that we said, yes. Second, will the strong help the weak? Greek example. There, the answer was 50-50, judging by the size of the haircut, which was exactly 50-50. That was also our answer. Third question was, will you help Europeans even though they're not part of the European Union? This is the Ukrainian question. And the fourth question is, will you help somebody who is not a European and who's not even out of this sort of Christian heritage, although I think we rather believe an economic religion rather than Christian religion, but that's something that we can come to in the debate. Mark, an interesting thing, all these 4 issues, or 3 issues, were solved. I think the word solved is the most important, the word sort of is the most important word in that sentence. It was sort of solved economically. We sent money from banks to banks, we sent money to Greece, and we came up with sanctions. We couldn't react in anything else except in economics. And then, now, the migrant crisis, you can't really send money somewhere. From a Christian perspective, of course, we have this imperative to love thy neighbor, but the neighbor must be far away. When the neighbor actually wants to be a literal, technical neighbor, as in he lives in the same street, just a different number, there we absolutely reject. Now, in the fourth crisis, the migrant crisis, we are in unison around political refugees. There the answer is clear. We don't know about the, again, economic ones. And also mark that in all of the 3 crises, the solution was non-systematic. All these 4 questions were questions, moral questions to us Europeans to move forward. This is the way it happens in life. You're never ready for the real questions in life. They were all solved in a non-systematic manner. In other words, all the bailouts we did were systematically non-systematic. In other words, what happened in Greece, we will help you, but this is one night stand only. Yeah, don't expect anything more from us. It was systematically, we could have, of course, we were lucky in unluck that all the countries that went bankrupt were small economies. So we could solve the system unsystematically. God forbid a bigger country would go bankrupt. There we would be forced as Europeans to come up with a systematic solution to the problem. To quote George W. Bush, it's not true that he didn't say anything sensible. He did say a couple of sensible sentences, and one of them, you can find them on YouTube. In 2008, when they were bailing out American banks, he said an interesting thing. He said, I had to breach the rules of capitalism in order to save the rules of capitalism. And that says that there, of course, are some exceptions to rules, but when the exceptions become dominant, then there is only one clear answer. There is something wrong with the rules that we are having. I think I've exhausted my 5 minutes.
Not yet.
I have
almost.
2 seconds. I give it to other speakers.
If I may, because I wanted to ask actually Martin Michelot from European, as a bridge from pure economy to the values, maybe these are the values that are missing. Maybe this is a kind of an ability now to adjust to the current challenges. How would you react?
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invitation, and thank you all for being here. Our values are strong. The values are still what keeps us together nowadays. They're the values that have you all in this room, I want to say. But you know, when you look at the current situation, you see that the double crisis that we're facing, this crisis of economics, this crisis of security, has in effect led to a third crisis, which is the crisis of confidence. And deep at the heart of this crisis of confidence are the values. And there are the values that have helped the populist parties gain their strength in lots of countries in Western and Northern Europe. And these values, you know, these populist parties question these fundamental values, which you asked me about. And let's just take a few seconds to imagine what these values are. We could argue and say that these represent democracy, stability, security, and prosperity. I think we can all agree that this is a body of European values that we all share, and ideals that we tend toward. And the question is, I mean, do we believe that the populist parties that we may soon be voted into power share these values? Do they provide these values? And the real question is, I mean, are these values at stake today? The most debated ideas, the most hotly contested idea, the values, is the one of security, which has been brought to the forefront by the refugee crisis. The other value that is under debate is the value of prosperity, and how prosperity is shared or not. And I think that the example of the recent Polish election, in which, you know, the fundamental message of the electorate was, well, the ones who were left away from the prosperity brought forth by the EU have voted the party out, is an extremely important message. So once again, also an economic response here. So the way I see it, I mean, the values that we hold at our core still exist, but the parties that have carried them so long, since 1957, since the creation of the European Union, the parties do not necessarily embody these values or communicate them in a way that is palatable to the public opinion. So I would like to frame this debate and say that it is actually for the mainstream parties to reinvent themselves and tackle the issues that the rise of the populist vote raises. I mean, fundamentally, these are issues of fear. These are issues of no longer being in charge of the events. And deep at heart is the question of decline, or at least the fear of decline, which is at the forefront. And being a French citizen, this idea of France, the great power of France declining, of France no longer carrying its weight in the European Union on the global stage, is one that is extremely prevalent in the minds of voters, and certainly explains why the National Front has had such a strong share of the votes in France. And this brings me to talk very quickly about the populist parties, the populist politicians, how they try to make profits from these crises, questioning the fundamentals of what helps us to live together. And I quite honestly think that these premises are based on misguided nationalism. Because what we see, and once again I talked only from the French example, is that these politicians do not want to take part in a common and shared space. And therefore, this blurring of the line between sovereignty and sovereignism, which is a distinction that the French president made at the European Parliament a few days ago, is extremely important to understand the granularity between sovereignty and sovereignism are two notions, is an idea that is extremely important for us to think about. I submit that there is space for countries to share their voice in the European fora without necessarily needing to reconsider the successes of integration. And I think that the panel of the ministers that preceded ours was extremely telling of how there are divisions within the V4 on how we are either part of the solution, or it is a matter of fact, maybe if you take it from a different perspective, which has been expressed by the Hungarian foreign minister, that you impose the solution. So this idea of imposing the solution versus being part of the solution is also reflective of certain values that are under attack, and that clearly for me is for the mainstream political parties to address. And that brings me to comment very quickly on what Mr. Sedlacek said about solidarity. I think solidarity is incontestably the word of 2015. It's the word that has been used and actually misused the most. And the solidarity crisis is, in effect, fantastic in a negative way to watch, because you mentioned the North-South solidarity on the economic issues. There's the East-West solidarity on immigration, when we're, in a way, the Western European countries are asking the Central and Eastern European countries to be an active part of to take an active part in the solidarity mechanism. And as a matter of fact, it's maybe even for the first time that the newer member states have been asked by the older member states to be an active part of the solidarity process, and this is one other aspect. And finally, I'll just close on this. The West-East aspects of solidarity, when the Central and Eastern European members of NATO especially are asking the West to express solidarity. So if you take this from the perspective of public opinion, when you hear all these expressions of solidarity, the necessity of solidarity, I think you actually start questioning the real value of this notion and what it actually embodies. And this is certainly one way to see the demise, or at least a partial demise, of our values, and that also question why we're still living together, all together in Europe in 2015.
Thank you so much. Listening about so many kinds of fears and having Kishi Schneider in a panel, I cannot help myself not asking you now, is it really fear? Is it really something that we are afraid of? Is it really the lack of security, confidence that is coming from the lack of solidarity? Jiří?
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you for this question. Thank you for inviting me. Definitely, I have an impression that more and more, and it's a very unpleasant impression, that the European Union as a common space and all its institutions, are they fit, was made for good weather, but not for bad weather. And we've put the solidarity clause into Lisbon Treaty, which is a very serious commitment, but we're not able to implement it. European dream, who has this dream? Is there one dream? I mean, whose dream is it? Is it a dream of a country which was a part of this business from the beginning and was created a kind of dream under American umbrella in 50s and 60s? Was it a dream of countries who actually were looking over the wall for the prosperous, more prosperous and free part of Europe, like our countries who were dreaming to come back to this Europe? Is it a dream of a refugee from Eritrea? who sees this as a rich and free space where he will not be in danger. And this is very relative. I've heard a very interesting and shocking article which was reporting what the refugees were saying. It was basically in France, near Calais, and this big concentration of that. There were clashes with police, and the refugees were saying, we like your police, we love your police, and they've been beaten before. And so the journalist asked them, why you love the police, they've beaten you. And say, well, in my place in Africa, they would have killed me. So it's very relative, you know. It's a dream that you are not killed by police, you are not killed by anyone. But I think we are questioning, we have created a common space, and we have lived together without noticing that we are living together. Have the people in Portugal noticed that they are living together with Estonians? No, almost no. Yeah, and it's a very, very tiny group of people who is moving across Europe, doing business, going for work across Europe, studying. I mean, the biggest group is students, but it's a very, very tiny group. And when this whole thing, this fear, something is coming, maybe we should erect the walls and fences again, because we feel insecure. We don't know who might be coming. I mean, imagine there is a person, small entrepreneur, with a small car, sitting in the local pub and talking with his fellows. Okay, this is terrible, what is going on, this wave of insecurity, we have to erect the borders, we have to reinstate the border control. Of course we have to do it, because we have to control it. And then he drinks a couple of beers, as it's usual in this country, and then he wakes up in the morning and realizes, okay, I have to go this week for some goods in neighboring country, be it Austria or whatever, and how do I like the vision that I will have to wait 1 or 2 hours at the border crossing? And guess what feeling prevails? Of course, the first one, to erect the border control, because how many people are doing business and using this free space for the opportunities? It's a minority of the people. So if institutions are not working predictably, as we've heard, we don't stick to rules, even political parties are not behaving predictably. There was a big surprise how certain political parties in Germany reacted to this. So if there is no predictability, how we can feel secure? So predictability is the first element of security. I'm not speaking about the other ones. So I'm afraid that when there is no trust and confidence that the people on the other side of the common open space are going to behave in the same manner as we expect, then probably we should have some small walls again. And I'm afraid that if the politicians are actually responding to this fear, because nobody else is responding, well, it's easy to call them populists, but I mean, if there is nobody else responding to that, then I mean, okay, in democracy, if nobody is responding, then the populists are responding, and that's what is happening.
Thank you. Thank you for this. I'll turn to Mr. Gordon Bakota, representing the Croatian Ministry of Foreign and European Affairs, just to ask about your experience, because you were the last one to join the EU, and you have the most fresh experienced, most fresh approach, you wanted to join. So could you please remind us why we wanted to join?
It's a very interesting and good question, but I'm very proud that still after 2 years after Croatia joined the European Union, despite the economic crisis, despite the recession, despite migration crisis, still the European values and the European Union standards are important issue in our country. 2 years ago, during the ratification, during the referenda for the European Union, we had a very strong, solid pro for the European Union. 66% voted for the European Union. And 2 years after, we do not see any difference when it comes to the Croatian pool. It means that standards, solidarity, values are still very important for my country, and we are considering the European Union as a union of values, European Union of solidarity. We have mentioned solidarity numerous times, but our strong conviction is that there is no other way how to solve or how to mild the situation with the migration crisis, but with solidarity. Croatia, 2 years after, consider European Union as a very important, strong tool regarding Western Balkans and Southeastern Europe. And if you see the developments in Bosnia and Herzegovina, in the negotiation process between the dialogue between Serbia and Kosovo, Montenegro strongly oriented to join the NATO and already started the negotiation process with the EU. Kosovo with SEE and Bosnia and Herzegovina with SEE. It shows that European Union is still so important for the countries in Southeastern Europe, and we are considering our role in Southeastern Europe as a very strong advocate, the staunchest advocate of the EU process for the countries in the neighborhood, for the sake of solidarity, for the sake of security, and in order to see the European standards in the neighborhood. So the other countries who are the member of the EU should not forget this strong message that EU is still important, EU is still a very vibrant idea in Southeastern European countries. Therefore, my government proposed throughout so-called Center of Excellence couple of numerous, more than 500 projects in Bosnia and Herzegovina, in Serbia, in Montenegro, and the other countries in the region in order to support them to join the European Union with our expertise, with our knowledge, with our experience, which is very unique because every single and different wave regarding the EU process was a different one. Just shortly, I want to make some comment regarding migration crisis because Croatia is one of the 11 countries who are on this very important route, and we have proceeded more than 360,000 migrants from September until nowadays, 6,000 per day, without fence, without any kind of measures or any kind of harsh steps from our side, because solidarity and the European values are very important, and we are deeply our policy in this regard is very much rooted on the European solidarity. I think that all of the countries who are engaged in this process, and this is a very strong European bond, should form their own policy, rules and regulation towards migration crisis based on a very important principle of solidarity, which means practically 17 points which we agreed upon a couple of weeks ago in Brussels. So any measure from certain countries based on the individual approach, based on the individual policy, without bearing in mind solidarity as a European value, as a European core, from my point of view, would not be a successful approach towards migration crisis. And this is a very sincere policy of our government, and we'll stick with this kind of policy in the future, because this is very deeply rooted in the European values. So this is the current situation, and I'm very proud that 2 years after Croatia joined the European Union, the European idea is still very strong in Croatia. This is the principle of values for our country. We had recently elections, very dynamic, fervent elections, debate in the campaign, but nobody challenged the European idea, European values. Nobody questioned whether it was a good idea to join the European Union or not. And this is a very good signal for my country, for the neighboring countries, as well as for the countries in Southeastern Europe, because they're all focused to the European Union. And if we are not ready to cop in our own backyard to support countries who are in the Europe, then how should European Union be effective or important key player in the wider region? So this is my message, and this is my strong conviction that we should definitely we should support the countries in the Western Balkans, and we should spread out the values of the European Union based on solidarity, particularly now in the migration crisis.
And I thank you for that, because this is a very good news for us as well, I believe, with such a optimism and comforting our maybe too pessimistic, maybe only too realistic thinking. And last but definitely not least, Madam Dragoljuba Benčina, the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Slovenia. And just to tell you that Madam Minister agreed to speak as the last one in the panel, to give all of us some political direction and some inspiration on where now to search for the values. Madam Minister, the floor is yours.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm able to give political directions. That would be a very difficult job, because even our presidents in Brussels and President of the Commission, although they are very good personalities, President Tusk and Commissioner Juncker, sometimes they have difficulties. But allow me to start with something else here. I must say that about solidarity, I can subscribe what was said from my Croatian colleague and neighbor here, and neighbor geographically. But let me say something. This morning, I used the opportunity of being here and present also tomorrow at Visegrad Plus. I went together with our ambassador to Hradec Kralove, where the military unit, medical doctors and engineers went to Slovenia to help us, because we asked all our partners in European Union for help, not only humanitarian but also concrete help. Right now in Slovenia we have 178 policemen from 9 European Union member states, and for me I was very touched there, because I saw a very small piece of solidarity, but these are concrete, I would say, concrete results or concrete gestures that there is still a lot of solidarity. And I was really touched, so thank you. I would like to thank here to Czech Republic, because the Czechs were the first who sent us humanitarian aid really the second day after we asked. And now everybody else is following. So I wanted to start with this. And then, of course, are we still capable of living together, and what is happening to us? I'm asking myself this almost every morning, because we are facing a lot of extra work in the ministry because of the current situation. And I went, when I was thinking what to say here, I went to see back the Schuman Declaration. And I will quote now: "Europe cannot be safeguarded without the making of creative efforts proportionate to the danger which it's threatened it." So I think we all face separately and jointly now a lot of challenges mentioned also before. They are threatening our integration and our future, I think. How we will respond to this big challenge of migration. Slovenes were some months ago strongly against any barriers. We were for open borders. Everybody declared that we will never do something similar like Hungary. But 2 days ago, our government decided that we should put some barriers, not to close down our border, but in order to manage the flow, big flows which are coming and will be still be coming through our country, in order to give them proper treatment and humanitarian help. Because if you receive at once 15,000, what happened some days ago, it's very difficult to treat all of them properly. I'm sorry, because I'm not so much talking about the future, but this, if we will not resolve this properly, I don't know what future we are waiting for. You know, it's easy when it happens to others, like when it was in Italy and Turkey and Greece, like somebody mentioned, we are not living so much together. But when they are coming to you, I told also today to the soldiers, they are used to, they were in Afghanistan and some other countries helping their doctors and engineers. But I went also there because a lot of my colleagues from ministry went as volunteers to help humanitarian. We were cleaning and distributing food. It's something completely else when you see at once 15,000 people desperate after weeks and weeks traveling, pregnant women with a lot of small children, you know. If they have decided to make this long journey, I mean, and half of Europe is talking about security threat and terrorism, and so here we face big challenges, and I do hope we will manage to do it in a proper way, so that at the end of the day we will still be proud about our values. And so we have faced this famous debt crisis. Now we have migration, now, some years ago it started. And then how to make euro area also more robust and resilient to shocks, because this is all connected. And how we will safeguard our principles of democratic legitimacy and accountability. This will, if we will be satisfied, how the social model of Europe, there are so many unemployed people. And this is one of the reasons why so many people are not satisfied anymore also about politicians. I'm the member of General Affairs Council. We are talking about this, how to solve migration crisis in last 13 months. Every session we use a lot of, but as the President Tusk said once, we are 28, we have strong democratic principles, we need a lot of procedures, so maybe here at the end we will successful. And to finish, I think we need joint response to this endeavor, united effort. Otherwise, and the basis for this is, I'm convinced, the principle of solidarity. So I don't want to talk so much about politics. I think it's a very nice occasion to be, and it's good to be member of Visegrad 4+. I feel very comfortable here, but there are so many challenges. I will not go back to Western Balkans. Slovenia is also doing from the very beginning everything what we can in order to help them to join us and to come to enlargement as soon as possible. But I think now these three challenges are more, I would say, more in need to be solved right now than the rest. But the rest will follow. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Minister, especially for reminding us the Schuman Declaration, which is probably something that we should start our days reading every day. It sounds that it is too much of the challenges and of the weak points of our everyday's reality. But before giving the floor to the public, maybe you would like to use 2 minutes this time to comment on each other's intervention.
Yeah.
Tomasz?
Yes. You started with solidarity, and that was exactly my point. What is the level of our solidarity? Is it the strong helping the strong? Is it the strong helping the weak? Is it Europe helping Ukraine, European country? Or is it us helping? So this, solidarity, you can have a solidarity with your best friends. This is, by the way, the key principle of Satanism: help those who help you and hurt those who hurt you. And you can also call that solidarity. So my question was exactly how far is our solidarity? What would happen if Syria would be a member state of the European Union? We would send ships to help these people get out. So what's the difference between Syrians and us? Is it the Copenhagen criteria that makes a man a man? Because that's the only distance between really them being... So anyway, one provocative thought. Another provocative thought: I am not afraid of the refugees at all. I am afraid of Europeans. We are building walls, we are starting wars, we start being aggressive. There is no way that... Mark, by the way, now that you reminded us the enlargement of the Visegrad 4, this was the biggest enlargement in the history of the European Union. A whole new ethnic group, namely the Slavic group, and an atheistic Slavic group, for that matter, was admitted into the European Union. There was not one single Slavic nation in the European Union before we entered. What were the fears? The French feared the Polish,
of course,
especially the plumbers.
The plumbers, yeah. Nurses as well.
Czechs were known for stealing things in the supermarket.
And this was our specialty.
Stealing or the plumbering?
Plumbering, but also
we
stealing
are now
German
specializing
cars.
more in corruption. None of these fears materialized.
Sure.
Yeah? And these fears have disappeared into thin air within maybe 2, 3 years, 4 years max. It is ironically, cynically, disgustingly funny how we react, the Visegrad group, how we react to another, by the way, the refugee crisis could be also viewed as a spontaneous enlargement of European Union.
A bit uncontrolled.
It's spontaneous, because we Europeans, although we fight, this is also that you talk about nationalism, we fight against the idea of nationalism, yet we make enlargements nation by nation. Yeah, so this is not in a bad way. I just came from Germany, the German way. Okay, this nation, you can come after you fulfill certain criteria, but if somebody actually has European values and wants to join in a sort of a spontaneous enlargement, questionable. Last point, because I don't want to take too much fun, because it's an extremely interesting panel. We Europeans, because we never will be Captain America. We will never have a European dream. Chinese don't have a Chinese dream. Japanese don't have a Japanese dream. Africans don't have Africans' dreams. So it's not. But we'll never be Captain America. We will rather be, I think, a union of Kafkas. You know, depressed, and we are, you know. Mark that that European Union is, I think, the only kingdom in the history of mankind that has most of its enemies inside. There's a lot of unjustified anti-Americanism going around, but not in America. A lot of people are afraid of Russia, not Russians. A lot of people are afraid of China, not Chinese. Nobody is afraid of Europe, except for Europeans. Can you imagine that you would have fundamentally anti-American political party in American Congress? Can you imagine that you would have not just opposition, but you would have an anti-Russian party in Russian Duma? Yet we Europeans have a great number of political parties that are fundamentally nothing else but anti-European. What's my point? My point is that this self-depressed European spoiled brat, to be a little bit brutal, suddenly hears 2 times, you are beautiful, you are desirable, you are a land of promise. We heard it from Ukraine. This was the first ever pro-European demonstration in the history of the European Union. Only sad part was that it happened outside of the European Union. And the second time we hear it is from refugees. In other words, all other superpowers that we have tend to view themselves more positively than the rest of the world. We Europeans, in our own mirror, look ugly. In the mirror of the world, we actually look pretty. So there's another dose of optimism, even from Czech Republic, which I know is very not likely.
Appreciation of what we have. That's the advice.
European culture has won the global culture. There has never ever in the history of civilization been any civilization which has been as globally non-violently dominant as the European via American. This is a hallelujah moment for our ideas of freedom and solidarity and democracy, etc., etc., etc. Yet we feel we have lost the battle. This, I think, is a little bit Kafkaesque again.
And let's stick to that. Yiji, you wanted to add the rest.
If I listen to Tomáš, I tend to say that the European dream is Freudian dream.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah? And, but I don't think it's that bad. Definitely we have a lot of guilt and sense of self-guilt, and then there are many people who would disagree that the spread of European culture was without violence. You will get a violent debate about that. But I wouldn't say that I'm not afraid of refugees, I'm afraid of Europeans. I'm afraid of bad people everywhere. And we should treat humans as humans. And unfortunately, I have to recognize that states cannot behave like people. States cannot be, like humans. To love neighbor and to love other people and to open all the gates. That's not how the states behave, you know. And
they behave like that with each other within the European Union.
But
if I may jump in.
No. They behave to each other. They do horse trading, and that was my second point. The method, it's not European method. It's not method Monet. It's horse trading, what is happening there. And we are not killing each other. We are doing it by dialogue, very tough dialogue, late in the night usually. But it's a tough horse trading. Now, if such a situation like this comes, which is a crisis, it's out of the proportion, yeah, then horse trading doesn't work. And it was clear from the beginning that quotas is a horse trading. Mm-hmm. Yeah. To apply quotas is like to do it like European budget. And this is a wrong method. You cannot do it like that. Somebody recollect the infamous conference of Evian in '38. There were Jewish refugees going out
Yeah.
of Germany, and nobody wanted them. The same thing.
Yeah.
This is how states behave. If you ask, here you have quotas, just distribute. This is how the states behave. I'm sorry to be very, very cynical, but in case there is a big crisis and hundreds of thousands of people are in need, there is no way how you can handle it within rules. Yeah. Look what people like Raoul Wallenberg did. They broke the rules of their country. They issued the passports against their rules. They broke the rules. If you want to behave in a human way, and you are a representative of a state, like a consul in a very dangerous environment, you have to break the rules. There is a dilemma. Let's face it. What I'm missing is this kind of distinction, a statesmanship. The prime ministers and leading politicians of our countries standing and saying, look, from a human point of view, this is terrible. And as a state, we will have to apply some harsh measures because it's not manageable. But we call the state officials and police to treat people humanly as possible. And we call the civil society to come and help us because we are not ready. But we assure you that we are going to manage it. Nobody said it.
Yeah.
Nobody said it. And it was just, zigzagging, warning that this is terrible, and then, okay, let's open the gates. I mean, both extremes are bad. You have to say, as a state, we have to ensure the public order, and it will not be nice. Sorry. You had to apply, certain barriers because it was not manageable, as you said. If you have, 15,000 people, you have to apply some not nice measures to make an order. But you can do it in a dignified way, and this is what I'm missing from our leaders, to say publicly, we very much value your service in police, in border police, in army, but you have to behave in a human way, because this is your duty. We are grateful to you. And then a call to civil society, and not to call them your idealist and you want to bring the immigration here, and say, if you are a people of goodwill, come and help. And that's what is happening. It's not just doctors from Hradec Králové. I think the best image the Czech society, not state, but the Czech society has is in Balkans, in Croatia, in Slovenia, where there's a lot of volunteers. We don't have it. We don't need institutions for that. They just call each other on the Facebook. One day, they collect money, they go there, after 2 days they are back. Ask the students, ask our kids what they are doing. They don't even advertise it. The few journalists write about it. So there is no reason to feel self-guilt. There is no reason to go to the Freudian, couch. Because there are good people in our societies who take care about this. But what we are missing is a proper balance that this is a terrible crisis. It cannot be, you cannot say we should stick to Schengen Treaty and Dublin and things like that. Wait a minute. I mean, impossible in such numbers. Yeah? But let's be human, even in this situation, and let's ask the state security institutions to behave in a dignified way. That's what I'm missing. If we'll be able to come through this, I think we will be right to what we call values. Otherwise, we will be just talking values.
To stay human. Would you like to intervene?
Yes, I entirely agree with you, Yichi, and I think what you're doing is actually making a case for leadership. Yes. This is what's at the heart of what you're saying, is that our leaders are not acting as leaders. And also, I think this is what is at the heart of the trouble that we're going through, is that we're desperately looking for leadership. We're looking for leadership at the national level, and we're looking for leadership at the EU level. And you're absolutely right in saying that our leaders are perhaps not giving us the right answers. And second of all, what I would like to add to what you say is that the citizens also do not feel empowered. The citizens do not feel that they're part of the answers that are being told. I mean, the pedagogical effort to explain why the refugee crisis took place, to explain why it is an important act of solidarity, of acting as Europeans, to help being part of the crisis, of solving the crisis, is extremely important. I mean, this pedagogical effort has not been made. So I'm very, and when you don't have these answers, you say, you know, the mainstream parties are not giving the answers, so it's easy to call them populist. That's what you said previously. I agree with you. It's you know, when the pre-packaged answers are let's leave euro, let's reassert our sovereignty, and let's restart our borders. I think these are simplistic answers, but are unfortunately indicative of the lack of leadership that exists in all these countries. And this is why there is this, you know, temptation, this Putin temptation. You know, we're going to cure everything with a shot of Putin. We're going to cure everything with a shot of leadership. But for me, this is indicative of nothing else than, you know, institutions that are going through a teenage crisis. We don't want to deal with our parents, so we're going to go try to hang out with the bad guys who are going to make us do the things that we probably shouldn't be doing.
So back to Freud.
Yeah, or back to Satanism as well.
Yeah.
So you know, we're really in the situation where the lack of leadership is expressed in very different ways. And you know, sorry, you said, you know, we shouldn't Schengen. We can't say that Schengen should continue to be applied as is. But you know, if we start accepting that Schengen is something that's not worth fighting for, then I think you're starting to unravel what is holding us together. These small things, or actually these very big things that exist since '92, that were, you know, part and parcel of the accession package for the country, including here. I mean, this was an advantage that was built in. This is all an advantage that, you know, our parents, the ones that we're trying to get away from, you know, also fought for. So I would be very, very cautious to accept a rhetoric whereby, you know, Schengen is off the table, which you know, Nicolas Sarkozy in France, for example, was the first to defend Schengen and to say that it's extremely important for the stability of the European Union. 3 years later, he comes and he's very adamant about, you know, it needs to be renegotiated. So I would be extremely wary of how this may harm the fabric of our unity in Europe. And once again, just to circle back to what I was saying earlier, it's the role of our leaders to explain it and not let easy answers come from the populist parties, or even worse, the parties that are sponsored by our non-friends in Russia.
One small thing, if I may. Schengen, I don't want...
I'm such a bad moderator, you really can.
Okay.
You can.
Come on, you can. You can. I cannot discipline you at all, but you are. It would be, I think, with a loss to the public if I was trying to discipline you. So.
Very, very shortly. I didn't want to sound that I'm against Schengen, but there are some preconditions to maintain Schengen, and this is mutual trust and confidence of security forces across the border. And it wasn't, I mean, it was necessary even before migration crisis. I mean, we have a problem with Germany. We produce a lot of drug called pervitin, which is sold to German market. And it goes across the border. I mean, it can be managed, and it was partly, you know, managed because of the trust between Czech and German police. But at the situation where Germany announced we are closing border with Austria without notifying anyone else of its neighbors, this confidence is eroding, I'm sorry to say. So, I mean, this confidence of police across the border, Slovenia and Croatia, you may tell stories about that,
there is no border.
Is absolutely necessary. If there is no border, you need a confidence between the police.
But isn't that the role of diplomacy?
Yes.
No, it's a role of diplomacy. It's a direct contact between the police departments, and they have to be able to treat with criminals directly. And if this if this contract of trust is broken, or if there are some doubts, then the whole Schengen is in problem.
But when you're closing the borders, when Germany is closing borders with Austria, this is the prior matter of diplomacy, no? Isn't this a failure, in a way, of the diplomatic corps, now that we're sitting here in this diplomatic atmosphere?
I mean, I don't know the exact details. Maybe they have called the Austrian headquarters, hour before they did it. But I mean, it's sending a message that there are things which are not predictable, and that's the problem. That was my initial point.
If I may, because apparently it turns to a check discussion that
this is
the
typical.
public is missing.
Check.
But
We can be
glad.
checking the borders. I mean, if all that we're careful.
We have 15 minutes, as we have to finish the panel a bit earlier. Would you like to intervene now, or maybe we can open the floor for some comments? I'm sure that the comments are coming. Yes, we have. So first, the person from the back. I don't see the person. All right.
Thank you very much. Evans Fenoulis, Metropolitan University Prague. I'm also an academic as Teresa, and I would like to draw upon her thoughts and continue with constructive criticism. Thank you very much for all your interesting interactions, but I think that more or less, in a way, you describe EU being reactive, which is the truth, instead of EU being proactive, which what it should have been when it comes to EU foreign policy in general. You talked about refugee crisis, and you presented in a way isolated and more or less compartmentalized from what actually happens in the broader picture when it comes to the Syrian crisis, for example. And I wonder, because all of you are either actively participating in the policy making and you will be consulting with your superiors or with your advisees when it comes to the Foreign Affairs Council, what is the advice that you're going to give in order to deal with the Syrian crisis right now, so as to more or less also have an impact on the refugee crisis? Because if we do not deal with the Syrian crisis in the long term, there is absolutely no way to stop refugees coming to Europe. And it's not only refugees, and it's not only migrants, it's also asylees as well. So it's interesting, more or less, when I heard also from the previous panel that our distinguished excellencies kept talking about migrants. It's not only migrants, it's also refugees and asylees, and we are bound by international conventions when it comes to international law, international humanitarian law, to act in a specific way towards them. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the question. You want to see as well, yeah.
Hello, I'm Vít Beneš from the Institute of International Relations here in Prague. I will follow the comments by Mr. Sedláček, who at some point made a comparison between the EU and the US. At first, I do not disagree with your suggestion that there are no anti-Americans in Washington. Of course, there are anti-Washingtonians, those who hate Washington. Even after
like
two and a half centuries, there are the debate between federalists and anti-federalists is still going on. Just look at the Tea Party. My second comment, if I compare the US and the EU, there is a difference. The US Constitution was built with the assumption that humans, it means Americans, are imperfect. Therefore you have checks and balances. Therefore you have the federal system with a delicate balance between states and the federation. I think that we Europeans too much, and the EU as a setup, too much relies on our good and positive moral characteristics, like solidarity, like leadership. The United States were built with the assumption that there may not be solidarity between Americans. It was built on the assumption that there may be populist political parties. It was built with the assumption that there may not be leadership from the US president. So I think that, and I'm going back to the title of this panel, re-enchanting the European dream? Are we still capable of living together? The Americans don't have to ask these questions because their political system was built with the assumption that they don't have to be perfect.
Thank you for this view. It's definitely interesting to imagine how it is on the other side of the ocean. But being here, would we have any more? Yes.
Thank you. Thanks to the panel for a really interesting, lively discussion. My name is Benjamin Tallis from the Institute of International Relations here in Prague. Just a couple of remarks sparked by some of the panelists' contributions. I think Tomáš Sedláček is absolutely right that Europe's too hard on itself. We live in a continent where a greater proportion of our population live with greater prosperity, greater security, and with greater prospects than any other part of the world. We should be proud of this, and we should be justly proud of this, rather than trying to make our countries seem to be as inhospitable and unattractive as possible in a race to the bottom that we've seen in dealing with this migration crisis. To Jerzy Schneider, and talking about fear, I mean, I think my mind's taken to Franklin Roosevelt, who said the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. And I can't help but think that the European Union's development as a security actor and the infiltration of security logics into the development of European integration has actually thrown us into a greater realm of insecurity rather than actually a greater realm of deep security, which we might consider to be at the heart of the original integration project. So once again, thank you very much for the provocative remarks on the panel.
Thank you. Tomáš, would you like to start with addressing those?
Yeah, absolutely. Somewhere down in my heart, I have a feeling that what we're getting in Europe is what we all believe in. We believe in small crises. This is going now to Jung from Freud. Jung said that nothing changes except in the situation of crises, least of what human beings. What if, for a second now, the Greek bankruptcy was an opportunity for all of us to prepare for bankruptcy of larger states, which will happen in 10 or 20 years if we don't change our fundamental rules of running our fiscal policy. Here I can be a very easy prophet. What if the Syrian migration or immigrant, and here I apologize for not distinguishing properly between the two terms, what if that is a preparation for a much larger movement of nations, which will happen most likely in 10 or 20, 30 years because of the climate changes? What if all these things that we've been getting were an opportunity, and I would here say perhaps a missed opportunity, to say, okay, this is a glitch immer of ourselves. This is an opportunity to prepare us for a larger, and if you think, I don't have time to go into it, but if you think about it, you will find in each one of them, you can even say that our inability to answer to the Ukrainian crisis, the question boomeranged again in a stronger force with the refugee crisis. If we would make a clear decision with Ukraine, then then we wouldn't perhaps perceive this as a crisis because we already would know where our values lie. The comparison between America and Europe, yes, there is a difference between America and Europe. That's why it's called America, and that's why it's Europe. Because you always compare something that's not similar, because you can't compare two things that are similar. But I am happy that if this remark of mine led to further thinking as to why we Europeans feel the way we feel and Americans don't. My explanation, and I quite here agree with yours, my explanation is that we, and I started with this a little bit, but I didn't finish it. We Europeans, from an economic point of view, we didn't do ideological diversification well. We've identified European Union with the economy and economy only. That's why when the economy is not doing well, we feel that European Union is not doing well, which is, if you ask America, the economy is going down, nobody's questioning the basic fundamental values of America, because American values are, I would say, more diversified than European values. This is why I said that Europeans have a tendency to overreact in economic, hysterically in economic realm.
Martin? Sorry, yeah, Martin.
Very quickly, just so we can have time for other speakers, I'll just address the question of the European leaders not being proactive and the vast question of what should we do in Syria. I find this accusation of European leaders not being proactive very tough to swallow sometimes, because fundamentally I believe that when we talk about leadership of the European Union itself, the EU is really the product of what we decide to put into it. I mean, we're the one who empowers Federica Mogherini, we're the one who empowers the Commission with an agenda to do something on behalf of the Europeans. And I think that the finger pointing and the blaming of, they're not doing enough is actually a little bit too simple. Where I'm ready to assign blame, on the other hand, and I'll link it to the question of Syria, is, and I'll also link it to what Jirji said about the fact that our institutions are fit only when we're in times of peace, is that our reactivity, our ability to adapt to strategic surprises is very low. And this is where our decision-making process is actually extremely difficult, extremely burdensome. And therefore, it takes a significant amount of time to reach a consensus on what should be done on Syria. And as a matter of fact, if just to give you a 1-minute answer to a 2-hour discussion on what we should do on Syria, well, unfortunately, I think that we are too late to try to, and I'm sorry to say it, I think we're coming a little bit too late in trying to solve what's going on in Syria. I mean, we're talking about a country where life expectancy in 2 years has dropped from 10 years, where half of the children are not in school anymore. So now you're not talking about dealing with Syria, you're talking about dealing with what is going to be a future failed state. And this is where we need to put on our thinker hats, our strategic thinker hats, our planner hats, and start thinking, how do we deal with the case of Syria in the next 10 years, but also how do we deal with the case of the other states that provide with an incredible amount of instability in the region and may very well be the immigrants of the future. And this is where this is where I close by saying that the Central Europeans are very right in talking about solving the long-term crisis, but the short-term crisis is maybe just as important at the moment. But we need to be able to use the left side of our brain and the right side of our brain at the same time.
Thank you. Gordon.
Maybe we are a little bit too critical. Maybe we are expecting too much because we have been facing really unprecedented situations in last couple of years. So this is a chain of such unpredictable events. We cannot compare nowadays, the situation nowadays with those 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So we have to consider the European Union as a work in progress. Nothing is fixed, and situation will definitely change in the future. So this is my concept, and we shall rather be more flexible and show much more understanding for very critical momentum in the European Union. And secondly, we have to, from my point of view, consider the European Union in a way that big things have to be handled as a big things. So be big in a big issues. Digital Europe, energy union, environment are the top priorities for the European Union. So we have to be big in the big issues. We have to show our stamina and our strong orientation, especially in those areas. So this has to be, from my point of view, our approach.
Thank you. If I'm to conclude, as I promised to conclude 7:20. Thank you for giving me some optimism. Maybe not the concrete advices yet, but I believe, I probably never stopped believing, that being a European is being attached to the values, and being European is great to see ourselves as humans, and maybe these emotional shakes that we are now being confronted with, that we are experiencing, are coming because of We are losing our confidence as to how good humans we are in the face of this greatest humanitarian crisis for the moment. And with this panel, I believe that we are quite good humans. Thank you so much for your participation in the panel. Thank you so much for your patience to my lack of confidence as a moderator. Thank you.
Thank you.